More on the Manchester derby a little bit later, but let's start with the North London derby. It is Arsenal against Tottenham. Let's hear from Antonio Conte, but first, Mikel Arteta.
I think it's all about emotion and just willingness to get to that moment and have enjoyment. It's the nicest game of the season by a mile for what it means to our supporters, for the history of it, and now as well, because looking at the table and where we both think wants to be becomes a really important match. So I think the word is excitement.
For sure, Arsenal had a fantastic start. They lost only one game against United, and then they are showing to be a really good team. I think that in the summer they made a good sign for them and improved the team. That, don't forget, last season in the last 3 games they were 4 points up than us. It means that we are talking about a really good team.
What a way to start the weekend, a North London derby. It's going to be an absolute cracker. And what makes it even better is that we've got a North London derby where the winner will go top of the table. I know Arsenal are already there, but that just makes it even more exciting and more riding on it, Leanne.
Absolutely. And I think, obviously, Antonio Conte, it's hard to believe he's only been in the job for 10 months. You know, what a miracle worker he's worked. If you ask Tottenham fans if they thought they were going to make the top 4, there would have been absolutely no chance in that happening. And I think what I like about what Antonio Conte did in his first transfer window, he brought in Kulusevski, brought in Bentancur from Juventus, players that he knew that were going to come in and do the job he asked of. And obviously last week, you know, 2 weeks ago when Son came off the bench, scored 3 goals. I mean, he's definitely going to start in this game. But, you know, I think it's obviously in England, it's probably one of the biggest fixtures in the calendar, isn't it? All the fans love this game and it's going to be a feisty one and probably the closest one we've seen in a really long time.
That's a really interesting point, isn't it, Darren? Is this the closest we've seen these two North London sides when they've gone up against each other in recent years? It feels like it.
Absolutely. I think you can throw the form of the last, 5, even 10 years out the window because the recruitment at both clubs has been outstanding and that's the reason for the change in both teams. Arsenal's squad is deeper, Tottenham's squad is deeper. That's why Son was able to be dropped before the international break to rediscover his form because they'd bought £50 million Richarlison. Richarlison now, and that's another subplot, if you like, because Richarlison and Gabriel Jesus for 9 of the Brazil shirt. That is the reason why both players will be fired up. He's come off the back of 3 goals in 2 games for Brazil. Jesus didn't get called up, so he's got a point to prove. So both those players will be rearing to go in tomorrow's match. But it's the depth behind them. You've got the players who are available if defenders aren't available for Arsenal, like Kieran Tierney and Tomiyasu, who can play right back if Ben White isn't available. You've got Bissouma, Højbjerg, Bentancur, Skip, who's available again in midfield to give them the energy in the Tottenham squad. There are so many variables. I'm not quite sure how either team's actually going to line up.
Yeah.
In recent years, you were able to call the Arsenal 11 and the Spurs 11. Not this time. A fascinating game.
I think Odegaard as well this year has been unbelievable for Arsenal, and they've had a lot of injuries this year, but you know, for me, when you watch Odegaard live, he reminds me a little bit of Dennis Bergkamp. And Dennis Bergkamp was my best ever player for Arsenal. I used to go to Highbury just to watch him, you know, warm up in the warm-up, and I'm a Man United fan. What a player he was. But when you see Odegaard, you know, a lot of people have said young captain, but if he's fit, I think this is going to be a major factor in the North London derby because he seems to lead that team in an unbelievable way. And Martinelli, Saka, and you're right, Darren, you can't really call, you know, what the starting lineup's going to be. And I've spoken about Arteta many times, and I've said I feel like he got away with quite a lot, you know, because he won the FA Cup in his first couple of months. It was almost like, and he was Pep's understudy, it's almost like he got away with not being asked upon his role at the club, you know, because they weren't doing anywhere near as well as they should be. Now they are. You can see his plan coming into fruition. A lot of young players, and they're playing at the top of their game. And if they don't make the top 4 this year, though, I do think still it will be a bit of a failure because last year was a failure, let's be honest. They should have made the top 4 and they threw it away. So, but both teams are in a good place, and I'm really looking forward to this game.
Well, when you're 7 matches into the season and Arsenal are top of the table, they probably didn't expect themselves to be up there, Darren. Do you agree with Leanne? Top 4 is the only way for Arsenal this season. Anything less is a failure?
Yeah, I do. I think when you look at... The interesting thing about both clubs is that they've both done these documentaries to give you an insight into what life is like. And I think what we're seeing with Spurs is that they're in a much better place than they ever were under Jose Mourinho because there's much more organisation. He has much more control, Antonio Conte. As far as Arsenal are concerned, I think that their documentary gives context to where they are now.
I think it helped them, hasn't it? Especially Arteta.
All of the low points, all of the difficulties. You being a player, so you know when you go through something together, it kind of brings you, it gives you a togetherness that helps you to fight. And what we've seen this season so far are signs of that togetherness, inspiring progress. So they beat Brentford when they couldn't last season. They're beating Fulham when they couldn't last season. They're beating Bournemouth where they couldn't last season. And you're seeing small milestones that they're reaching. This is another big test. They didn't pass the first one against Manchester United, but I think that they will fancy themselves to pass this one against Spurs.
Do you think they can be contenders, Darren?
Yes.
Because a lot of people
not to win the league,
okay,
but I think they can.
But if it gets to around Christmas and this is still the same situation, do people start questioning that? I know Liverpool and Man City seem, you know, especially Manchester City, seem so much better. But I think, you know, I agree with you about the teams they're beating, because I don't think this Arsenal team would have beaten Bournemouth, Fulham in the way that they did last year. Because I think a lot of people have said, you know, they're only playing against these types of teams and they lost to Manchester United. I think at times people don't give Arsenal enough credit, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I
do.
That Manchester United game was the only time they've dropped points this season, and they still have a 100% win record at home. How much of a difference will it make that the game is at the Emirates?
I think the away team has been the victor in this. I think it's something like 16 or 17.
You just ruined my stat there, then.
No, not really. No, not at all. Not at all. Now, I tell you why it's a good stat. It gives it much more intrigue because this isn't the Arsenal team of the past. Yeah. And I think this Arsenal team, it's got defensive stability, it's got that steel in the middle, it's got that silk in Odegaard, and it's got that cutting edge up front. They didn't have that at any stage of the last 3 seasons. Jesus is a player up front who takes responsibility. He's got the energy of Martinelli behind him and Saka on the right side.
And conviction. And the conviction he has, absolutely. And he always has that willingness. And I think the win against Brentford, again, was a great win for Arsenal, because I don't think we've seen an Arsenal team push aside. In a good team in form. Ivan Toney's in good form at Brentford, you know, Rico Henry's in good form, and they pushed them aside in a really professional way. And that's absolutely right to call that, because some people will look at it and think, actually, that means it's going to be a straightforward affair. You know, it was 3-1 last season, wasn't it? I don't think that's going to be the case at all. I think it's going to be much tighter.
Hugo Lloris is a doubt for Tottenham, though. How much of a blow would that be if he isn't fit for the game?
Yeah, I think obviously, you know, there's been a lot of talk about this week about Oblak coming in from Atletico Madrid because he's out of contract soon. He's going to be 35. I think Hugo Lloris has been a fantastic goalkeeper for Tottenham. As we saw last season when Galini come in, he made that mistake, and, you know, it will be massive if he doesn't play. We'll have to wait and see. Hopefully he can play, because I think, you know, the way he plays out from the back, sweeper keeper coming off the line, I think it changes the way that Tottenham play. Obviously, they play a back 3 with Eric Dyer as well, but obviously we'll have to wait and see, because Sessegnon's been playing, you know, for Tottenham this year, which we didn't expect to see happening. So, but Antonio Conte's really good at adapting. I think that's something that you can see the players, they have a plan B and a plan C, so hopefully Hugo Lloris will be able to be fit and play.
Yes, guys, so we want to hear from you. We want to know who are your 3 derby winners this weekend. Get in touch, use the hashtag PLFans. Guys, derby weekend, big games. What are you guys looking forward to the most? What games excite you?
I mean, I know there is the Manchester derby this weekend, but I think for me, I'm most looking forward to the North London derby.
Really?
I think because Arsenal top, and if Arsenal win, they extend their lead at the top over Spurs. But if Spurs win, they can go above Arsenal. So it's probably going to end up in a draw and no one moves. But I'm just really looking forward to. I don't know. We saw how good that was back end of last season and how much was riding on it. So Arsenal are going to want revenge, perhaps.
They're going to need revenge.
I think they're finely poised, actually. Normally, they're derbies, but one team's dominating at the moment, at least on form. But I think we go into both of these two, at least. We'll come back to Nottingham Forest and Leicester City. Both of these games, Andrew, it could go either way.
That's the thing. It's interesting because Arsenal are really on form and Arsenal are playing really well. But I think Tottenham are just... That front 3, when they get flying, and the way I think they will set up with the way you saying, like the way United set up against Arsenal, and Son and Kane on the counter, it could be it could be a long day.
And the thing is, a bit of a hammer blow to Arsenal's campaign. They did so well for most of the season
and played well in that game.
And then, as they got to the final furlong, Tottenham effectively that was the win that got Tottenham into Europe or into the Champions League spots.
For sure.
And Arsenal not convincing win. Let's have a look at it. Look, here you go.
Harry Kane.
Harry Kane, bullying Arsenal.
We can't forget he is now the top scorer in North London derbies in the Premier League. He always scores in this fixture. And he's always... He's involved in absolutely everything, Harry Kane, so I wouldn't be surprised if he found the back of the net. I don't think this is going to be 0-0, let's be honest. I think there's always goals in this fixture as well, but especially after that game, I mentioned revenge earlier. Do you think, we saw Mikel Arteta, you know, we've seen in the documentary where he brings back certain tweets that other players have made when they've played against Arsenal. How much do you think he's going to be looking back at that fixture and using that to his advantage for this game?
He has to. Because when you see what they were just doing to them there, that was just bullying. That was just so, like, might report that, what I just saw. So I think he needs to use that so they can get in their heads. Like, and the thing about Arsenal, they play so well, but you don't want it to be a thing where they lose to all the big teams.
And they play well, because they played well against Man United and lost.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You don't want to be a thing, they're doing well, they play well against the big teams, but they lose. So I think he's going to come and make a statement. It's at home as well, and like, they normally win at home.
Yeah, well, in the last 5 North London derbies, I think the home team have taken all 3 points. So that will be a bearing, but what a coup it would be for Tottenham if they can go away to the Emirates and get all 3 points.
I wouldn't bet against Antonio Conte as well. Like you said there, Andrew, to me, Spurs are going into this game exactly the same way that Man United went into that game with Arsenal. And with Son, Kane and Kulusevski's now out, but Richarlison, that's 3 really lightning-quick players that are so good on the counter-attack. How well Saliba plays against Harry Kane could determine the outcome of this North London derby.
I mean, Arsenal are no slouches at the back either. You know, they've got quick centre-halves. Gabriel's quick. You know, the full-backs are quick. But the Manchester derby, again, that throws up another amazing match-up, because we've got one of the shortest centre-halves in Premier League history against one of the most prolific centre-forwards in Premier League history, at least over the amount of games we've played so far. However, the last time they faced each other in the Bundesliga, Martinez came out on top. Premier Lea's a whole
It's a different game, it's a different game.
And most importantly, Haaland is just that little bit more experienced.
He scores in every single game.
Haaland's scary.
Premier League, Champions League, International. He just hasn't even stopped. And I don't worry for Martinez, because he's come up against him before and he came out on top, like you said, Jay, in that game. However, the form that City are in, they're just devastating at the moment. But stopping Erling Haaland, Andrew, I think you stop the source. If you stop the source to Erling Haaland, you stop him, because he's not one of those players that creates all the goals on his own.
But that's the danger.
That's the hard part,
It's because you can stop him for 90 minutes. 91st minute, he can tap a goal in it.
Yeah, but the source, if you stop, I know it's easier said than done, but stopping Cancelo, Bernardo Silva, Kevin De Bruyne, that's where you stop.
You have to stop 3 of them. I should just name 3 worldy players. Like, stop them guys, and it's calm.
But you've got to be at the top of your game.
If you stop Cancelo, can you stop KDB?
Every player's got to have their role, and if they do their job, then it's possible.
Here's a newsflash, Liv. There are Premier League players that wake up in a cold sweat about stopping Kevin De Bruyne. It doesn't happen
it's
easy.
Easier said than done.
Do you know what I love about games like this? Because even though City are on form and Man United are on form now, and they had a slow start, none of that matters when it's a derby. It's like all of your form goes, all of the season goes. It's the game on its own, and I can see United doing their thing as well.
Really?
I can see them doing their thing.
Is that your head or heart speaking there?
I don't know. I don't think it's your head.
As a neutral, that's my heart.
That's what
I want a good game.
OK, let's go and catch up with Io now in North London. And we need to apologise at this stage, and I'll tell you for why. It's going to get a little Arsenal-centric for a few moments, and Io being a big Arsenal fan, that's fair to say, isn't it? Where are you and who are you going to be speaking to?
Honestly, I'm at such an iconic location. This is the Arsenal Supporters Club, and if you're ever walking down to the Emirates to watch the football via Finsbury Parkway, you will most likely walk past this building. I mean, this place is absolutely stunning. If you look at all the walls, absolutely glistening with pictures, past and present, of Arsenal, the old Highbury, the Emirates. You can see Nicolas Pepe there, you're glancing past, and some other amazing players. And I'm joined by 2 Gooners ahead of this North London derby, and I've got to say, it's quite an evenly poised North London derby. We've got Barry, who's the secretary here at the Arsenal Fans Club, Supporters Club, and also we've got Annabelle, who's a writer for the Gooners fanzine as well. Let's start with you, Barry. This is a massive game, isn't it? Got to say, Spurs do have bragging rights based on the fact that they pipped us to the post to get into Europe, but at the Emirates, we've got a great record against them.
We have. We're going to do it. Definitely going to do it tomorrow. The team are up for it. The fans are up for it. It's good night, Tottenham.
I love that fighting talk already. Let's come to you. I mean, this is a massive match, and I've got to say, it's probably the first time in many years where you see both teams at the top of their game. And I think if Tottenham end up beating Arsenal, they'll go top of the league. for the first time, the North London clubs have ever traded places for that.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen realistically, is it? I think for the first time, our team are going to be really, really up for it. I don't think emotions are going to come into it as much as they did, even though there's not much on the line like there was when we played at the Tottenham Stadium at the end of last season. We all know how disappointing that was. I do think that the players are ready. I think having a lot of players rested has been a really encouraging sign. And also just the mentality is stronger. We've got new players now who know how to turn up in big games. I think it's going to be a great game and hopefully a good result.
Yeah, we talk about big players. I was reading an article earlier about someone like Granit Xhaka, a player that actually, right at the beginning, fans weren't sure about him. I'll put my hand up and say I wasn't quite sure about him. Now becoming quite a leader in the team and a pivotal part in what Arteta's trying to do at Arsenal.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of Granit, but he's the rock at the moment. We can't do without him, basically, I'm sad to say, but that's it.
For sure. Yeah. And, Anna, let's come to you. Derby Day, big one. I know it's a big of a family affair for you as well, because I know your family, you share a season ticket. What kind of rituals do you have, and who gets dibs and who gets a ticket for the day?
Do you know what? My dad has become so nervous. I think for the last couple of years, he hasn't cared at all because there's not been much on the line. Whereas now, it's bragging rights who gets to go. So I'm actually going on my own tomorrow, but I'm not worried about it. I think there's such a family atmosphere now. Everybody is so banded together. They're behind the team that I think it doesn't matter. Like, as long as you're with the supporters, you know, you're cheering the team on, it's just going to be like the best experience.
Yeah, for sure. And Barry, this place is somewhere I always walk past. I've never actually been in. This is my first time, so this is a bit of a dream come true as an Arsenal fan. What is it like on Derby Day? Because I've walked past it and it looks like people are literally spilling out. No one can barely get in it.
Well, you can't move in here on a match day, especially a Derby Day. Tomorrow's going to be manic, absolutely manic. They'll be out on the street drinking. Just got to get the result, basically. And then after the game, you won't be able to get in here.
Well, let's hope we get a win, or Arsenal get a win in that sense. And for you, Annabelle, how do you think it's going to go tomorrow? It is quite tight. I know we were talking about, you know, we might win, Arsenal might win, whatever. We're doing that as fans of the game. But this is a massive one for both teams, and it's a real credential-proving match.
For me, it's how the first 20, 25 minutes of the game go. I mean, this season, we've been really good. We've come out firing on all cylinders at the start of each match. You know, we've got some really good early goals that have kind of cemented our position in the game. It depends whether we can make any of it. We know that Conte is going to come out, he's going to concede a lot of possession, he's going to let us have a lot of the ball, but are we going to do anything with it? I think if we can get an early lead, you know, the fans are going to be even more behind the team are going to be able to pass more confidently, try things that are a bit tricky. If that goes well, we've won that tactical war, but it really depends how that game starts, and that's what I'm really nervous about. I mean, we're all nervous when we go into the start of a game, but are the team going to come out well, and are we going to play well? That is the issue that I'm most scared about.
It's a thing on the lips of many Arsenal fans. Well, while we're talking about the derby, a very unlikely thing happened. We actually put two opposing fans, a Tottenham fan and an Arsenal fan, both artists, to talk about the derby tomorrow. Here's what went down.